Hello, everyone, and welcome to this latest edition of Ed Talks, our monthly cybersecurity talk show with wicked smart people. And I have to say that because I'm from Boston. Joining us today, we've got three very distinguished professionals, Dr. Larry Bonaman of the Bonaman Institute, Devin Bryan of Carnival Corporation, and Sarah Morales of Google. In a moment, I'll be asking them to introduce themselves. But first, just very quickly, want to give you a little rules of engagement and information about where to go for help. On the right-hand side of your screen, you should see a question mark. There you can enter questions. We've got moderators standing by. They'll be watching for the questions to come in, and if we can work them into the discussion we're having live, we will do so. If you have any technical challenges, there's also a support icon at the bottom right, a little orange icon with a headset logo. Feel free to click on that if you need technical support. So the Ed Talks are very straightforward. I'll have all the panelists introduce themselves. Then we've got 9 to 10 different topics that we'll discuss. When we're done discussing the topics, I will ask each of the panelists to deliver the final word, hopefully in 10 words or less, to leave our audience with one bit of wisdom at the end. So what I'd like to do is I'd like to start with Sarah, then we'll move to Devin, and we'll wrap up with Larry as far as introductions. So Sarah, if you please.
Sure. Thanks, Ed. Thanks for having me. I'm Sarah Morales from Google, and I lead the external engagement program for our security engineering team. So my goal and my team's goal is to have Google be an engaged and active member of the security industry. So finding places where we can meet and talk with others, share the innovations that we're driving forward, and also look for places where we can collaborate. I've also been involved in the security industry diversity efforts, met Devin and Ed, and worked with many others out there to try to collaborate and figure out how we can drive forward a more diverse and inclusive industry and community. And I will hand the virtual mic to Devin.
Thanks, Sarah, and thanks, Ed. Great to be here. Devin Bryan, CISO of Carnival Corporation, with responsibilities for ensuring the cybersecurity of our shipboard and shoreside application systems, networks, and data. And so happy to be here. Look forward to the conversations today.
Thank you. I'm looking forward to hearing from both of you. And last but not least, and right on time, coming back online is Dr. Bonaman. Larry, can you please introduce yourself?
Sure. Well, firstly, I want to apologize for having some technical difficulties, but we're overcoming. I'm Larry Bonaman. I'm the chairman and founder of Bonaman Institute, which is a research company focused on data protection, privacy, and information security. We basically have been in existence forever. I think we're entering our 23rd year, and I've been in the industry sort of for almost 50 years. So that makes me an ancient man, a person. So anyway, it's a pleasure being here with you, and I look forward to a good conversation today.
Thank you, Larry. I was just thinking back on how long you and I have known each other. It's actually it's going up on 20 years at this point. So it's
Right.
been a pleasure these last 2 decades with you. So, all right, with that, let's begin. Let's begin. Now, I'm going to go out on a limb and assume that everyone watching here knows about and recognizes the name and the company of Google. What they might not know is what Google does to help promote diversity and inclusion in cybersecurity. So, Sarah, can you talk a little bit about that and let folks know what kind of your job is and what Google does to help D&I?
Sure. So overall, Google has many commitments in the diversity space. As I mentioned, I'm on the security team, but just to overall give you context for Google as a company, we've made a number of commitments over the last decade, but most recently in the last 2 years, we've taken a stronger stance on racial equity commitments. So actually, if you just Google Google's racial equity commitments, you can see more details there, but our focus has really been on internally. So helping to attract, retain diverse talent. So that's been focused on, what are the different opportunities that we're bringing for people within our company, the career support that we're providing, the opportunities for growth, where our offices are located. So we've been expanding in regions like Atlanta and Austin. Also product inclusion. So I would say internal focus, product inclusion. So how are our products working with folks throughout the world and throughout, the diversity field. So things from, how do our cameras work when they're taking pictures of folks with different skin tones, to how we're displaying different types of businesses within our products, such as Google Maps. And then I would say also on google.org, and Google as a company investing in nonprofits, organizations, and universities that are trying to advance and support people in their career journey. So you can see on Google's keyword blog some of the commitments that we've made. I think even just this morning before I logged on, there's some updates on investments we're making in our offices and data centers across the United States. Within the security industry, that's where I've gotten more involved. A lot of our focus has been on partnering with organizations such as Cybersecurity, which is where I've met Devin and Ed through partnerships with groups like WESIS and Women Cyber Jitsu. And a lot of my focus has been on helping to support the organizations as well as fund events and training programs. I really believe that through building community and helping people in their journeys and giving them opportunities through scholarships to get trainings, to meet each other and help each other along the journey is how we will drive forward this, the community as a whole. So a lot of my focus has been meeting people and building communities, having, talks and conferences and helping people get to attend those. I think, as all of you know, is a lot of the ways that our community has grown so much is through people coming together, virtually over the last 2 years, but also in person to meet, to network, to share ideas, right? Because many of the challenges we're all facing together. It's not just one company facing them, and learning and sharing with each other is how we've kind of lifted the industry as a whole. And making those places feel more comfortable and inclusive for all people to attend them. So a lot of my funding has been on that and giving scholarships and funding events. Most recently in March, we were at the WESIS conference, which was an amazing experience with 1,700 people that were there, all thinking about how do we work together towards some of these goals. So a lot of that is investing in organizations and activities that have this D&I focus.
Yeah, very, very cool. And I had the pleasure of first getting to know you, as you mentioned, in working together at Cybersecurity, putting together a cybersecurity training scholarship program for red teams and blue teams, which was very exciting. And as part of that program, one thing that I learned about you, Sarah, is that you lean in pretty hard when you're putting your money to work. It's not just, you're writing a check. You get really involved, you roll up your sleeves, you get intimately engaged with the participants and with the sponsoring organization, and that's terrific. And speaking of the WESIS conference, the Women in Cybersecurity that happened just last month, I also want to congratulate you because I do believe you were recognized and were awarded for the Sponsor of the Year for that organization. So well done there, and thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Yes, I was actually completely surprised and had to change my flight to get that award. So,
don't go away yet. We have something for you.
Yes. But I think those settings and meeting, a lot of times we hear in this field, that there's a talent shortage. It's not there. And you get to these events and actually see there are a lot of people who are actually engaged and getting into this field and excited about being in this field. So I think, we're going to talk more later on kind of retention, but I think that needs to be more of a focus too, because meaning a lot of students or a lot of people who are career changers and, 1,700 women and allies were there, and the energy level was really high. I even met high schoolers, which I was very impressed of.
That's great.
I definitely did not attend a conference when I was in high school on my future career. So it was very impressive to meet, these young women who are super excited about cybersecurity and are only, say, 17 years old. So I think, us supporting those women in staying in this field, I think will be how we really start to change it.
Very cool. Very cool. All right. So I'm going to go out and make another safe bet here. And I'm going to guess that most folks tuning in have heard of the Bonaman Institute or read one of the research reports or referenced one of the many famous data studies like the annual cost of a data breach. And over the past 20 years, that institution has been a stalwart of research and thought leadership in our space. So, Dr. Bonaman, I've got a question for you. So can you tell us what you've seen in terms of businesses and organizational practices that have worked well with respect to diversity and inclusion? And if you have examples of what didn't work well, that's welcome as well. So what do you think, Larry?
Well, I haven't been around this field for many, many moons, many years. There's things that you've learned work very well, and others that just are a miserable flop. Diversity is so important for so many of us. The idea that the diverse organization is, in fact, more powerful and can achieve better goals, more goals and better goals, is obvious from some of the research that we've done for many years. In general, what we find is that there are impediments to diversity, as you could well imagine, because building a diverse workforce can take a lot of effort, and it's well worth it, but nothing's free. Basically, things that we need to have in place include better privacy and security activities. So that's a good starting point, but it spans the whole organization, not just cybersecurity. On this end, we do, as Ed you so kindly mentioned, we do a lot of interesting research projects. At least I think they're interesting. I assume you do as well, and hopefully the audience does. We completed a recent study on diversity in the U.S. cybersecurity industry to try to understand how diverse organizations are in terms of employment, in terms of role and responsibility. And this was literally focused just on the cybersecurity space. This particular piece of research has been a labor of love, Ed. We've been working on it for months and months and months.
Yep.
But the scale of this study is gigantic. The sampling frame that we use is close to 100,000 names, people, individuals. Sample almost 4,000 usable surveys. So the numbers really reflect that everything I mentioned before, that a diverse workforce is essential to having a successful organization. And I firmly believe that to be true. Just the last thing I want to say is, consulting firms are kind of involved in diversity for many, many moons, and sustainability and ethics, generally speaking. So we see probably the most mature programs in firms like my firm, past firm PricewaterhouseCoopers, and other larger size consulting and accounting firms. And now that's my spiel. I turn it back over to you, Ed.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Larry. And I'm actually very excited to read this final report. It was commissioned by Cybersecurity, a non-profit dedicated to improving the lives of women and underrepresented minorities in cybersecurity. And I understand that it's planned to be published, I think, by the end of this month, another 2 or 3 weeks. Brand new research on diversity and inclusion in cybersecurity, which I've been waiting for a while. So I'm really excited to read that final report. And thank you, by the way, for sharing a couple of tidbits with us about the report. We're going to be talking about it in just a few minutes. But I want to go to my third guest now, Devin Bryant. Devin, you've also been around the cybersecurity industry for quite some time, and you're a very well recognized name. However, I'm not quite sure that most of the folks watching here realize how active you've been in the fight to help balance the representation scales in cybersecurity for underrepresented minority demographics. So can you please tell us a little bit about your journey and what motivates your tireless efforts in D&I and cybersecurity?
Yeah, thanks so much, Ed. And before I even get started, Sarah, congrats again on your award at WESIS. That's so truly well deserving. And Ed, certainly, hats off to you for your tireless efforts in supporting organizations like Cybersecurity. To your question, though, about 2014 or so, group of colleagues and myself, after sitting in yet another RSA session where there were no female keynotes, no Black or brown presenters on stage or in any of the breakout sessions, thought, what could we do a little bit differently? Walking around the world's largest cybersecurity conference, and you're only seeing a handful of females, handful of Black, browns, Asian Pacific Islanders, the underrepresented minority groups. What could we do, the 4 or 5 of us, to leave the industry just a tad bit more diverse than we found it, right? Knowing full well that this is a very complex problem that spans and pulls on, it crosses multiple facets of, socio-economic, geo, and others. What could we do as 4 or 5 CISOs to help change the dynamic just a little bit? And so we came up with the idea to start a 501c3 that at the time was ICMCP, the International Consortium of Minority Cybersecurity Professionals. We have been so truly blessed over the years that we've had folks who really care about addressing the diversity gap in cyber. Folks like Sarah, who we crossed paths with several years later, and yourself, Ed, who take time away from all you have going on to volunteer, right? To donate your time, nights, weekends, and holidays to help drive our programs forward. So, as one of the Cybersecurity former ICMCP co-founders, I've been truly, truly blessed and very, very lucky to have been part of a movement, if you will, that started out truly grassroots, arguably still in our startup phase, for the most parts, right? But the lives that we've been able to touch, the trajectories that we've been able to change along the way have just been so truly rewarding, so truly fulfilling. The scholarships that we've been able to award, through the kindness of, folks like Sarah and the organizations she represents, and with the help of volunteers, again, like yourself, who've helped to make the phone calls, schedule the meetings, organize the committees, scholarships, mentoring, which is such a huge part, right? So, I've been, very, very lucky, Ed, to have been a part of this movement that started out as ICMCP back in 2014, 2013, seeing a need that we thought we might be able to help address, knowing that we can't solve it. As I said, very complex problems, but we wanted to just do something a little about it. Knowing full well, again, that, we won't be able to solve this, but we wanted to take tangible steps to start out, do the little that we could, to leave the industry just a tad bit more diverse than we found it. So it's been truly, a life passion of ours, a passion of mine, to have been able to contribute back to an industry that, quite frankly, I have gotten so much from personally and professionally.
Yeah, I very well said. Thank you. And I'm really glad that you mentioned mentorship as well. Sarah mentioned, you didn't participate in any industry trade show when you were in high school, and neither did I, nor did I have a mentor when I was in high school. And one of the things that I love about organizations like WeSys and Cybersecurity and other organizations is that they do have a mentorship program. It's a very active part of what they do. And Devin, you sit on boards of other organizations as well committed to diversity and inclusion in cybersecurity. So I love to see that element of it coming out. And there's actually a related audience question that I just wanted to pose to any of the panelists that want to address it. And the audience question kind of related to that a little bit. And the question reads, do you think there's a shortage of talent or shortage in people willing to teach skills on what they desire for their company? Any thoughts on that? Anyone?
I would say it's a combination of both, right? I would say that for the more complex cybersecurity skills, right? The level 3 analyst who's expected to look at a malware-laced packet, let's just say, and help to decipher, who's behind that attack, right? Who's behind that malicious piece of software. So the whole reverse engineering malware, the level 3 analyst within the SOC, it's hard to just, pick those skills up coming out of the gate, right?
Right.
Same with, the folks who are doing, the hardcore engineering, design of your cloud, your application security infrastructure. So there are certain disciplines within the field that requires advanced skills, and those are hard to find. And there's just absolutely not enough of them out there, right? But there is a ton of other disciplines within the field that, quite frankly, if organizations, hiring execs within the cyber field would be more aggressive and think more outside the box in terms of upskilling, reskilling, right? Existing practitioners, we might not have this huge gap that we do have in unfilled jobs within cyber. So I'd say it's a combination of both.
And you touch upon an interesting point there, because one thing that I've come to learn in my long history in the cybersecurity industry, is that there are many positions in cyber that do not require advanced degrees, super technical skills. And that's something that I think needs a little bit more awareness in general, because it's such a lucrative set of jobs and career opportunities for folks. And I think a lot of folks get intimidated and scared off because they think, oh, I've got to be a real bad hacker, or I've got to be able to reverse engineer malware, and I don't even know what that means. So that's I think a myth that we as an industry need to debunk a little bit.
Yeah,
so
I
I see you nodding, Sarah. I'll take that as agreement. Okay, so I want to dive into. Oh, I'm sorry.
I was just saying, I will nod as well. The upshot is that a lot of organizations don't understand the requirements to become a diverse employer or workspace. And a lot of organizations, schools and educational institutions of great quality have a difficult time integrating some of these issues into the standard curriculum. And I've seen situations that were very interesting. Many years ago, I had a conversation with Bill Gates, believe it or not, in a conference, and asked him what the future of security looked like. And he thought that the best people to hire for security and other related fields was music. And he really was thought and really believed, that people who play an instrument, and violin, for example, or guitar, or whatever, didn't have discipline that you wouldn't find in other industries. And at that point, that was a big objective. This is now going back, again, I said I'm old. It was more than 25 years ago, but it really stuck with me that music was a skill set that helped organizations become more secure and gave people a more structured roadmap to learning and understanding these complex issues. Not necessarily diversity, but obviously including diversity.
Well, I also don't think it's necessarily a coincidence that the music industry as a whole is much more diverse than many other industries. It requires a certain creativity and diversity of thought to approach it. But Larry, in every single conversation I have with you, I learn at least one thing new. And I never knew in our 20 years of knowing each other that you had a conversation with Bill Gates about security. How did that never come up?
Yeah.
So, great.
Great.
All right. Well, so Larry, I'd like to dig into your data a little bit. So this upcoming research report. So as you mentioned, you sent out over almost 100,000 surveys over the course of several months, and you got nearly 4,000 responses. And this is just a quick snapshot of some race and gender demographics that you were able to extract. Now, one thing that's certainly stands out as this research and the data was collected in the second half of 2021, and it still looks like we've got an absolutely massive predominance of white males in cybersecurity roles. And what I'm seeing here is females right now representing about 18%. I mean, that might be up from 15% that it was a few years ago, but still very much dominated by white males. That's one data point I want to point out. Sorry, Larry, you wanted to make a comment on that?
No, I just was nodding my head, but you can see it.
Got it. Okay. But here's the second data point that I wanted to point out, which I find fascinating, is out of those 4,000 folks that you surveyed, only 37% had a 4-year degree or higher. That blew my mind. Now, I know that a lot of organizations, Accenture, for example, recently dropped the requirement to have a degree in order to go for a cybersecurity job. Some other organizations have done that. But that was an interesting data point that I found. So the two interesting things for me is the degree piece, and then the continued predominance of white males in cybersecurity. So Larry, let me ask you, what was your most surprising piece of research as part of this study?
Well, you know what? Believe it or not, it's exactly what you said. The fact that there are educational institutions that would love to provide, create a degree or advanced degree in cybersecurity, but it's just the percentages suggest that's not the case. And now, to be fair to Accenture and other organizations, not everything you do in security requires a PhD or even a master's degree, right? But it's nice to have that credential. it's also important that the programs provide the content that it needs in order for its students to become effective leaders in the space. But it is surprising that despite all the conversation around training and awareness, we basically don't see a high percentage increase in terms of the quality and quantity of the degree, and as well as non-degree programs like a one-year certificate. It's still a long way. I think but there are signs that it's changing. Schools, Carnegie Mellon type universities, there aren't many of those. So community colleges have become a place for people to learn a whole lot and be very successful in their job, even if it's not the MIT Carnegie Mellon gang. I am a Carnegie Mellon graduate, but don't hold that against me.
No, it is interesting. I mean, and is this a trend that we're seeing where 2-year degree programs or just certificate programs or continuing education programs that will allow you to get maybe an industry certification is completely sufficient to start and have a career in cybersecurity? Devin and Sarah, what do you think about this?
I agree with your statements, Ed. I mean, advanced degree, undergraduate degree or postgraduate degree isn't necessarily the only indicator of how successful you'll be in the field of cyber. So I think all of us can speak to wicked smart people that we've worked with, work for even, right, who, didn't graduate from an Ivy League, might not even have a master's or a bachelor's degree, right? So it's certainly a data point. It shouldn't be the deciding data point whether or not you take a chance and give somebody an opportunity, right, to really show what they're capable of doing. Certification certainly also has its place, right? But again, the degree, I was a little bit surprised at how low that percentage was, quite frankly, considering how dominated the industry is currently. I thought it would be significantly higher than 37%. So that was really eye-opening. I completely agree that, with getting rid of the degree requirements for cybersecurity jobs as well. We talk about, the talent gap and why that continues to challenge us as cyber defenders. A lot of times we're just reusing past job descriptions that have been handed down over the years, right?
Yeah. And they may have been lousy to start with.
Bingo.
Yeah.
And not taking the time to really look at what's being asked for in those, job descriptions to match them up against what you really need in your organization today, not 5 years ago, not 10 years ago, right? And really taking a hard look at those degree requirements. So I certainly agree with your points there. Sarah, I don't know if you have a point. Perspective.
Yeah, I think one thing, at least for here at Google, a lot of it is also just your domain knowledge. It doesn't always matter where you are. It's just what knowledge do you have, how do you approach problems, and how do you go about learning. One of the big things we support a lot and also look to are people who are engaged in CTF challenges or for people who are participating or running their local conferences, right? Like a lot of I think this is one thing for, you attend a community college and are part of your cybersecurity club. You can have just as much knowledge there as if you went, to CMU or one of the other big large scale universities. There's, one of the great things about this industry is I think sometimes those names don't matter. It's more, have you put in the time? Do you like to break things and fix them? Will you keep at trying to solve that problem and dig in deep into that malware? A lot of that like approaches, I think, and just making sure the companies value that and are assessing along that, not just looking at the name on your resume or what's on your resume.
It does lend itself to kind of an apprenticeship type of model, right, where you can sort of learn certain skills and job functions as you go.
Yes,
which is again kind of breaks the model of you must have a 4-year degree and a technical degree to be in cybersecurity. No, not necessary. Clearly.
Yeah, and I was actually just researching, and I don't know too much about this, but one of the things I was just thinking is, the White House is right now putting a lot of effort on cybersecurity and thinking through and looking at how, the nation can invest in this. And it made me think about ROTC. I was never been in the military, but the ROTC program, right, is how a lot of people have, gotten into universities and then gone on to serve in the military. But does that exist in the civilian side? I know from just honestly doing searches, and I'm just new to looking at this. There are a couple programs through the DoD, and there was one through actually the National Science Foundation. But then when I looked, it said there's something, and please someone write me if I'm wrong, about 10 to 12 scholarships a year, right? That's not a lot. I don't know how much a Rozzi does, but something like if they were to invest in something like that, make it this civil defense fund. I think I even didn't read something Craig Newmark Foundation is calling for something along those lines. But how might we, private, public sector, look at that? Are there programs where you can help get people training, then they go and work in the field for a certain period of time? I think those are kind of some of the creative ideas coming out, and I'm hoping that through talks like this and bigger collaborations, we can figure out how to drive that forward together. But some of these training programs, and then, I think are really critical in doing that, and not requiring, again, a 4-year degree.
For sure. So we've got a couple of audience questions. That topic certainly stimulated some activity. So first and foremost, if you have signed up for this webinar, either with Cybersecurity or Security Innovation, you will be on a distribution list to receive the full report by the Bonaman Institute that was sponsored by Cybersecurity. So you will get that. But there is a question from Ty Lambo. Hello, Ty. And so the question, this is for you, Dr. Bonaman, and it's a statistical sampling question. So why did only 4% of the people surveyed actually respond? And Ty wonders, is it perhaps a lack of interest or fatigue in spotlighting diversity gaps? Or is that a statistical, acceptable number?
Great question. Thank you. My answer, basically, my answer is not as good as the question. In general, when you do a survey, you have a percentage that represents what we call a response rate. Response rate, when you're dealing with people who are busy, doing lots of things, maybe other surveys, to get them to spend the time to do the survey is a labor of love. It's difficult. So that response rate of the 4%, if you compare it to other studies done by Bonaman Institute and some of our major competitors, it hovers around 2 and 2.5% to about 3.5%. 4% is actually a phenomenal result. In fact, it's almost 3 standard deviations above the mean. So again, that response rate occurs, and it's not going to be 20 or 50% or 100%, because you can't build an objective research model with those percentages. But 4% is actually very good. And if you're a statistic, we have a whole bunch of stuff that we could share with you. Sorry about the background noise in helicopter.
No worries. So interesting. So Larry, you did throw out 3 standard deviations beyond the mean on this call. So just proving my point that we're talking with wicked smart people on this talk. So hopefully that wasn't lost. But essentially, Ty, to answer your question, 4% apparently is an excellent response rate. So we're very pleased with that. Apparently, folks are not fatigued about it. In fact, I guess they have a lot to say about it, and they were very active in participating. So I was glad to hear that. All right, so another question from the audience. This one's a little bit longer. So Sarah or Devin, feel free to answer this one if you have an opinion on it. I'm just going to read it verbatim. To the survey data showing lack of degrees in cyber, where does the panel think that education training community should focus on for largest impact? For example, at New York University Tandon School of Engineering, where Devin and Venables sit on our advisory council, we have great programs for K through 12 STEM, all the way up through PhD research, non-degree lifelong learning, et cetera, et cetera. So going back to the question, where does the panel think that we as a community should focus for largest impact? And by the way, the Venables reference is Phil Venables, currently the Chief Information Security Officer for Google Cloud and a veritable legend in the cybersecurity industry himself. So Devin, if I may, kick this over to you.
Wow, so that's a tough one for me to answer, right? So
sorry.
No, it's fine. I'll give it my shot. I can certainly provide my parochial perspective, right? And I mean, each cyber exec you ask would probably start with that, right? So where are my most pressing needs, right? Not just right now, but what I see coming at me down the line, right? Certainly being very mindful of where are my businesses going, right? Where's my organization going? From an IT transformation, business transformation perspective, in looking over the horizon a little bit, so that I can anticipate what the skill sets of my staff need to be in support of the key business priorities of my organization, right? And I think that's how we kind of have to think about it, realizing it might not be, because academia doesn't move as fast as we do
Right.
typically as companies, right? But so I can certainly over the next 3 to 5 years, 5 to 7 years, provide some projection, some forecasting as to what my needs are and will be over that nearer term horizon. And they are probably shared across most of the CISOs who would respond to this question, in paying attention to cloud adoption, cloud consumption across our organizations, right? So as our businesses look to consume, the services of cloud to transform their go-to-market strategies, to deliver better, faster, cheaper, more efficiently to the customers that we serve, cloud certainly ranks, very high up there, right? So I need cloud security engineers that's going to help me protect my businesses and our business operations as they consume cloud, multiple, right?
Mm-hmm.
Not just
Mm-hmm.
one, but multiple, right? So we think about cloud, we think about data and big data analytics, right? How are my businesses consuming that to deliver transformational customer experience, more products, more services, right? And so I would need data scientists, right? The same is true for mobile and innovations along those lines to better deliver services to our customers. This is new for me, being now at Carnival Corporation after having spent decades in the financial services sector. I never had to worry about securing, onboard OT systems that's essentially powering, helping,
Yep.
these floating cities navigate, right? So maritime cybersecurity and all that implies is a huge area of learning opportunity for me and growth opportunity for me and my staff, right? So what does that translate to in terms of how the question was posed, right? So I would have near-term focus on engineers of all sorts, flavors, and types, right? Whether those are cloud-based or infrastructure-based. Certainly for folks having exposure to embedded systems and embedded system security, I certainly would want to talk to them, as well. Translating all that into a curriculum at NYU, that might be Joel or one of my other colleagues there, but that might be a little bit difficult to adjust on the fly. But those are just some of the top of mind considerations that I would have. So if take nothing else away, produce as many cloud security engineers as you can, data scientists as you possibly can, and folks who can help us address some of our current as well as emerging needs along those lines. Sarah,
Yeah, so I heard four major trends there. So cloud, mobile, embedded IoT, and data science as major trends for you today. So one thing that I find interesting about organizations like Carnival is that you've also got to stay abreast of legacy systems as well, because floating around on every single Carnival cruise ship is a mainframe, as far as last I heard. So you've got to understand mainframe all the way through the latest and greatest sensors that are sending data on your ships. It's amazing.
We try to keep our mainframes in our data centers, but we do have data centers on board each of our floating vessels. But you're right, we do have legacy that we have to address as well. So I consider those to be table stakes, right? So those are the trench work that happens day in, day out. But your point is spot on. We can't just look at what's over the horizon. We got to focus on what's in the here and now as well, Ed.
Right. All right, Sarah, next question is for you. And I'm going to tie in another piece of Dr. Bonaman's research with a question that just came in from the audience here. So first, the slide. And the slide says, this piece of research, the question was basically, what is the most significant barrier to achieving a diverse workforce? And interestingly here, and it goes to that question earlier from the audience about the cyber skills shortage, 63% of respondents said that the inability to retain a diverse cybersecurity personnel or staff was the most significant barrier. And that's a big number for a survey. Now, related to that, the question that came in from Tyrone Geedon, thank you very much. The question here is how important is it for those that want to enter the cybersecurity field or those that want to advance within the profession to adequately assess where they sit today with respect to experience, education, and certification? And then how do they identify what they should concentrate on? So related, 63% of respondents said inability to retain personnel is the biggest barrier. What do people that want to be retained have to do to make that an easier thing?
Sure. So to cover both those, and thank you, Tyrone. I think from the business side of retaining talent, and this is kind of just my personal experience in working in the field and working with others within my teams. I think career mobility, coaching, and support are really important, right? People get in the door, and then sometimes, especially in big organizations, can feel a little lost or feel sometimes like the only woman or the only person of color in the room. So I think first it's investing in programs like mentorship and sponsorship, right? So giving people the opportunities to meet senior leaders who might have similar identities or allies of different identities, providing internal career coaching opportunities and stretch opportunities. A lot of people enjoy what they're doing, but they, I think similar to Tyrone's questions, think, what do I want to do next? And so giving space for people to lead projects, to propose ideas, stretch opportunities is a big thing within Google's culture, and giving people chances and then having safe spaces for them if they are to not reach their goal, be able to learn from that and still be supported by their managers, right? Stretch opportunities are a stretch, right? So supporting people as they're learning and growing and making them feel comfortable that even if they don't reach that, thing that they're reaching up high for, that they're going to be supported along that journey. Things like blameless postmortems or thinking through, okay, what could that have been? That's a huge part, I think, of retaining talent, of feeling invested in and feeling like there's opportunity to grow. And if, the growth has bumps along the way, to feel supported and that they're not going to, lose their role or their opportunity just because of that. I think also for us here at Google, and I think also within the industry, is finding community groups, or we call them employee resource groups. So being able to participate with people from, who maybe have similar identities, but different types of roles. I know I help lead one of our internal women in security and privacy groups. So we come together and have different talks and just kind of meet each other across different teams, talk about some of the challenges we might have, and also just learn from each other in kind of a smaller, inclusive environment. I'd also say participating externally, right? I've been lucky to be able to meet all of you through my role, and I've, many people on my teams, encourage them to go out and participate outside of your company, right? We really are an industry. We're, like I said earlier, are learning from each other. So giving people on your teams and within your company the space to go learn at a conference, to attend a conference, to speak at a conference. I think that, again, is really investing in your people, and they will want to stay longer within your teams if you're demonstrating to them that as individuals. I think the last thing, and we've learned a lot of this from COVID, right, and all being at home, is flexibility in schedules, flexibilities in locations, right? I actually met a couple of months ago a woman who's a longtime researcher in security, and she, has probably been in the industry 30, 40 years. And I was talking with her because, we don't meet a lot of women who've been in the security industry for 30 years.
Right.
And she said one of the things that her company did was allow her, when she had children, to work part-time. So she didn't leave the workforce. She was able to work part-time, work from a different location. And that really kept her in the field. And now she's a very well-known, has a number of patents and research with her name against it, for security hardware research. And that flexibility that they allowed kept her in the industry and didn't have her step out of it. So I think being able to allow that flexibility, I think now, companies are much more flexible than they were 3 to 4 years ago, but allowing people, to have those schedules, I think will keep talent. I think to Tyrone's question, figure out also what you enjoy and you're passionate about. I think one thing also, a lot of us have learned the last couple of years, it's not just what your company, what you can do for your company. It's also what can your company do for you. And so thinking about where, if you are really passionate, like figuring out what part of this, huge industry we're in, you're most passionate about, whether it is detection and response or red teaming or compliance or, 0-day exploits research, right? Figure out also what you enjoy most, and dive deep into that. Obviously there's certain spaces, I think, that Devin spoke to. Cloud security is a huge, growing, crazy fast field. And so But there's also long-term big things like internet standards, right, that keep moving along that you can dive deeper into. So figuring out, what interests you most and diving deeper. I think as you advance in your career, you often are, you need to kind of narrow in on a certain expertise. So I would say, yes, certificates can be helpful. Yes, some of that, but figuring out what you're most passionate about and building kind of an expertise there. And then bringing that to companies and saying, hey, I'm a deeper expert in this area and these are things that I'm interested in. Don't be, I think, afraid to take that route. And, some of the people I think are most respected in their field, that's what they did. They got really passionate about a narrow area and now they're leading black hat talks on it. So
Exactly.
So that answers his question, or their question.
I think it did. I think it was a fantastic answer, actually. And there's one thing that I want to tease out of what you said a little bit, because I think it's a very important management and leadership quality where obviously we don't want any of our coworkers or employees to fail, but encouraging them to try different things and letting them know that if it isn't successful, because nothing is successful all the time, we all make mistakes, we all have failures, that it's okay and it's a learning opportunity, and it's a space where that's a still safe to operate. Failure is an option, and it doesn't have to be catastrophic. It doesn't have to be, something that you feel ashamed about. And I do think that in the cybersecurity industry, there does tend to be a lot of what is the term, nerd shaming or nerd sniping that can come up from time to time. And so I love the fact that you call that out, as a leader, to be able to provide that sort of safe space for your employees. But I also really appreciate that you're giving the guidance to folks to have some type of aspiration or a goal and say, this is what I want to be. Because unless you know where you want to go, how do you know how to get there? And, happen to be working with one, young gentleman, near the Houston area who wants to be a cloud architect. And I love the fact that he knows he wants to be a cloud architect. So he is, very methodically placing, learning opportunities and project opportunities in front of himself, so he can learn more about that. So when the opportunity presents itself to go for a cloud architect position, he's got experience and education, and I just love that aspect about him as a person. So thank you for reinforcing that as well.
I think one other quick thing too, if you don't know, don't worry either. To be honest with you all, like I got into security because I went on maternity leave and couldn't commute and found this team, and they put faith in me and some of my skills. And I transitioned into security out of being on a kind of consumer support team. So also know, especially I think earlier in your career, I don't know how old everyone listening is, but you can transition and that's okay. And skill sets can apply. And I think also showcasing that, okay, I this is how I'm going to approach a problem. I might not know the content right now, but I'm going to dedicate this time and learn this. And I have these skills and I believe I can do that. I think that's, especially as, the internet has changed so much. Like I even look at my children, I'm like, who knows what the even job market will be in 20 years, right? And so being able, I think that is, I forget who it is, but some article, like being able to deal with change and work through change and show, okay, I am going to put this time in, and sharing that with people. It's okay to also share, hey, I don't know this, but I think this is it. Or if your company or place offers rotations, like see if you can go on I don't know, we call them 20% projects here, 20% projects.
Mm-hmm.
Do networking within your company or in this field. One thing you like is, I've met Devin because I asked him to come do a talk and he was really nice and did it within our own company. People are very, I think, open to meeting and chatting. So find someone on LinkedIn and see if you can learn from them. Like it's okay to also like do that networking and figure it out. You might not know right away, or life might bring you a certain way, and that's okay too. I think just being able to show you're willing to learn and change and move with the times, because that's a lot of security too, is some big thing is going to happen probably in another year, right? We had Log4j, we had SolarWinds, like there's something, this industry is also driven by that. So that's
absolutely
okay.
The next disaster is always right around the corner. Right? Yeah. Right. Yeah. No, I do like pointing out a lot of folks in the industry that have diverse education backgrounds. So, whenever I talk with Edna Conway, who's the Chief Information Security Officer for Azure Security and Resiliency at Microsoft, we always joke that we both have the same undergraduate degrees, and they happen to be in English literature and mechanical engineering. neither of which have anything to do with cybersecurity, and yet we both ended up in cybersecurity. And one of my favorite just people in general, Sharon Burgess, who's the Chief Information Security Officer for BCD Travel, and someone I get to work with Cyversity, her undergraduate degree was in languages. So, she's fluent in Spanish, which is great, but here she is. She's a CISO of a multi-billion-dollar international corporation. So you never know where your paths are going to take you. And if you've got an interest in cybersecurity, it's easy to follow that interest. So building on that, Devin, a question over to you. You've been a CISO and you've represented a lot of very notable brands in your day, including today with Carnival. So what, one or two qualities have you seen in leaders that you admire when it comes to diversity and inclusion?
So I would say there's two primarily. And the first one is integrity. I think as leaders, period, we have to have integrity in what we do, what we say, and how we conduct our affairs, right? What that translates to in the context of your question is you have to walk the talk, right? So if as the CEO, right, you are in the public space championing, advocating, your company's website, is littered with, how D&I is a priority for you, right? But when you look at that same website and the entire leadership team, it represents, one dimension of diversity from a demographic perspective, that sends a message, right? Similarly, when, you look internally across the organization and, representation matters big time, right? And, and so if folks are going on record, if their public statements and others are championing, D&I, they have to have integrity in how they are walking that talk, right? And how that's manifesting itself throughout the organization at all levels, right? You can't walk into the board audit committee or the board of directors, and the entire C-suite, and again, it's all homogeneous, right? So I think walking the talk is important. Representation matters, from a D&I perspective. And the other related to that is courage, right? So leaders have to have the courage to stand up for what they believe in, right? So again, if D&I is important to you, are you going to have the courage to take a stance, and drive initiatives that could potentially cause friction across the organization and pushback, right? So I would say, organizations and leaders who I have admired in this space have demonstrated both those qualities. They've walked the talk, and they have demonstrated coverage in tackling what is a very difficult issue, and have moved forward on those with tangible outcomes.
Love it. Love it. So to be successful in D&I, you need to have C&I, courage and integrity. Love it. All right. So one more question before we jump to the final word with each of our panelists, because I think we're going to run out of time. However, I do want to get back to Dr. Bonaman's research, and Dr. Bonaman, I'll start with you on this one. So, but then I want each of the panelists to sound in on this. So you asked and got over almost 4,000 responses about, what do you think the likelihood that the diversity gap between qualified cybersecurity staff and job openings will shrink over the next 2 to 4 years? And I found this particularly interesting because 41% said likely or very likely that this diversity gap is going to shrink in the next 2 to 4 years, where 59% said not likely or no chance. So first, Dr. Bonaman, I'd like you to comment on that, and then I'll toss it over to Sarah and then Devin to have your thoughts as well. So Larry, if you please.
Absolutely. Well, firstly, when people respond to the Bonaman survey, a question like this probably requires a lot of discussion because it has potential implications, huge implications for organizations, especially as we just discussed integrity-related issues. But what we found is that our respondents, when asked the question, what's the likelihood of a diversity gap between available qualified cybersecurity and job operations, and we basically find that the percentage is way too high. We see this as a problem that's maybe even getting worse in some respects. I think, in consistent with our other speakers, I think what we've noted over the years is that there is an old boys club for many of us, which is wrong, but it happens, and as a result, things like diversity and issues relating to integrity and even ethics become very salient. So I think that particular question is an important question about do you perceive this gap going away? Very unlikely, no chance to, in fact, increase it. I hope it's not increasing, but the evidence suggests that people are on the line.
That's interesting. Yeah, it's interesting, Larry. You talk about kind of that old boys network that seems to be still pervasive. And one thing that I've seen organizations try to do to address that is to try to remove as much bias as possible during the hiring process. So by the time they're actually speaking with someone live or on camera or in person, they've already gone through a number of qualifying steps that have been completely removed of any type of information around name or gender or your sexual preference, etc. That's one of the ways of removing these biases during the hiring process that I've seen organizations try to address it. But it sounds like some of the respondents think that maybe it's not enough, it's not fast enough, etc. Sarah, let me kick it over to you. What do you think about this diversity gap closing in the next 2 to 4 years?
I mean, I'd probably fall in the less likely category just because 2 to 4 years is pretty fast. I mean, I would hope 5 to 10. Investing in things like universities, developing, training programs, getting folks scholarships to study and then get into the field, which are all things we need to do, having, different types of roles, automations that then make it easier to access certain roles. I think maybe we'll see incremental growth, but 2 to 4 and a vast change, I don't think we've seen big enough signals
too
for
much
that
change in such a short period of time.
Yeah, I mean, I'd hope again that if there is a focus from the government and from many of our industry partners that 5 to 10 years we'll see a shift. But and as we see more investments in things like I think it was mentioned in the NYU comment with K to 12 education, you're educating high schoolers, they're not going to workforce for 4 to 6 years, 8 years, I hopefully over that time. But I think I would probably, if I was in the survey, on the not likely side just for that period.
Right.
But hopefully longer.
Mr. Bryan, your opinion, sir.
Sorry, just trying to unmute. +1 with Sarah. Completely agree. When we think about women in cyber, right? I think the ISC Squared has been reporting on that for about a decade now. And I think we're just now at the point where we're seeing potentially an uptick to where I think Dr. Bonaman's results was like 18% currently, and other figures averages around that. But that's over a 10-year plus time frame, right? Unlikely we're going to see that much dramatic shift in the next 2 to 4. So I would agree with Sarah, probably 5 to 10.
Got it. Okay. We are almost near the top of the hour. So I'd like to jump to what we refer to as the final word. And I'll start with Dr. Bonaman, then move to you, Devin, and Sarah will have you bring us home. So if you can, Larry, in 10 words or less, leave our audience with one bit of wisdom with respect to diversity and inclusion in cybersecurity, please.
Well, number one, I love all of you and have integrity. Those are the 2 things that are important, love and integrity. But love, because I believe that we really are in a field that's great. It helped lots of people. It's more than just a job. And it's nice to see, based on this group, that we all, I think, are seeing things the way they need to be seen, and we are internally consistent. And that's really important.
All right. Thank you, Larry. Love is important. No denying that. Way over 10 words though, Larry. You're a mathematician. Come on. All right, Devin, please.
Whoa, this is a good one. So I'd say, in the words of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., life's most urgent and persistent question is, what are you doing for others? We should all try to do something for others.
Thank you. And thank all three of you for spending the last hour with others trying to spread the word. So Sarah, bring us home.
Well, I don't know if I can beat love and Dr. Martin Luther King, but I would say for our field, what I hope to see in partnership with all of you is us really opening doors for more people to join and helping them to support them in their growth, and whether they decide to be technical experts or the next CISO, just hoping we can all, come together and support each other in making this a more inclusive space.
Here, here. Fantastic. All right, one last request for you all. Larry, you're going to have to do this virtually, but please give me a fist bump. I'm going to take a screenshot so we can all post it. Everyone, oh, there we go. All right, thank you very much. Thank you all for your gracious time today and your wisdom. It's very much appreciated. And for all of you listening, we didn't get to 6 of your questions. We will address those via email, and if necessary, I will reach out to Sarah, to Devin, and to Larry to address the question specifically. But until then, thank you for your time, and hope you enjoyed this Ed Talk, and hope to see you yet another one in the future. Larry,
Thank you,
Devin,
Thanks, Ed.
Sarah,
Thanks,
thank you
everybody.
all.
Take care.
Thank
Bye-bye.
you all, and have a great day.